Can you believe we're still not even very far in chapter 6? Oh, actually, we're almost halfway. All right, we are in Genesis 6. We are looking at verse 9. But let's look at verse 8, just because that's where we ended. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh. He found favor. That's grace. Here we go with grace, right from the beginning, and we're going to see it all the way through to the end, right? We got our bookmarks, Genesis and Revelation. Verse 9 says, this is the genealogy of Noah. Now, we've already seen genealogies. There is still a missing vav in this one, so we know it's not complete yet. But he, Noah, is going to be a shadow, a type of Messiah, the Redeemer. It says, Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generation. Noah walked with Elohim. Who else walked with Elohim? We know that Enoch is said to walk with Elohim and that the Lord took him. Well, in a sense, Noah's being taken too. He's just being preserved. He's not being removed. He's being preserved. I think that Enoch is being preserved for something as well. Don't know what that is. Could just be an example, but anyway, that's another story. It talks about the genealogy and it talks about Noah as a righteous man. I want to bring up when it says perfect in his generation. We know from the New Testament, from Peter, that Noah was a preacher. This 120 years, while he's building an ark, we're going to see those instructions, while he's building an ark, he is also preaching. He's speaking. Let's remember this, that while Lamech dies, Lamech hears the promise of the ark, or you're not going to be with the people for more than 120 years. He also understands and sees his son building an ark. But Methuselah lives until, it is said, 1 week before the flood. So Methuselah actually watches the whole process. So while they say, and well, the Bible says, Peter says, that Noah was righteous, he was a preacher in his time. Can you imagine for 120 years, you're building, you're having some kids, and you're preaching. You're saying the end is coming. Just like 2 Peter says, they mocked. They mocked to the end and saying, you've always said this, you've always said that. Could you imagine that same thing happening here? Well, look at today. People are like, oh yeah, Jesus is coming. Everyone says that, right? And people just mock it. Well, the same thing. Noah for 120 years is like, I'm building a boat. Something's going to happen. And people are like, what the heck? What an idiot. There's no lake here. What are you thinking? Right? But he's a preacher. And he's seen as perfect. That word perfect is tamim in the Hebrew. And it means pure, like his DNA is pure. Again, hinting to something more than Seth and Cain's lines. Hinting to something in the actual DNA being perverted. I mean, Satan wants to pervert the seed of God because he knows if that seed continues, he knows God tells the truth. That seed's going to crush his seed's head. So if he can create the oppression, if he can pervert the seed of man, then the seed of God's not going to be able to come because it'll all be in a perverted shell. Okay, another reason why the Lord's like, got to get rid of this DNA. Got to get rid of it. This DNA, the evil of the fallen ones, is perverting people's hearts. Okay, because they let it in, right? But Noah didn't. Noah stayed faithful. Noah did what he was told to do. That's so important. Do you know in Matthew 7, when it talks about the two houses, right? One built on a rock and one built on sand. If you really read that, it says the one that was doing. It's not what you believed. It's what you did. Because as James says, your actions show your faith. Your words don't do squat. What are you going to do is what tells. It's the real testimony. Jesus could have said, oh, I'm here to die for your sins. I mean, blah, 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 blah. But if he didn't die on the cross and raise again, it wouldn't have mattered. Action is so important. When the Lord speaks words in Genesis 1, if the things didn't form and obey his words, it wouldn't have mattered. Actions are what is required and what shows the faithfulness of the words. Without action, words have no faithfulness. They cannot be proven. So here he's seen as perfect in his generation, and he walked with Elohim. You have to walk so closely with Elohim requires a sense of perfection's not the word I want to say, but righteousness. And by righteousness, I don't mean a righteousness that we can't obtain by ourselves, that only Jesus can and we get through him. But in Deuteronomy, I believe it's the end of Deuteronomy 8, it talks about a righteousness, and that is walking in his ways. It says that our righteousness, yes, we get it from Jesus, but there's another righteousness that's ours, and that's according to our walk. What did we do? And it says when you keep the commandments, when you keep his mitzvahs, when you keep all the things, you walk in his ways, then that is your righteousness that you're able to do. That's not a salvation issue. That's just a walking issue. For us, it's once we come to Messiah, once we come to Jesus, how are you going to walk? What you going to do with it? Getting saved is just the hello, welcome in. Now what you going to do? How are we going to walk? How are we going to represent? So here we see Noah walked with God. He's preaching. He's living testimony. Him building is the testimony and is the preaching as well to what is to come. It says, and Noah brought forth 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I would suggest, again, we know these 3 sons are born after the 120 years. No, not the years, but the proclamation of it. It's during the 120 years. So is it that basically all, and I say all, is it all those being born after this basically just perverted? Is their DNA corrupt? Is it that there's just this corruption that just keeps continuing? But he and his wife were able to give birth to 3 sons that were not corrupt. I mean, Methuselah wasn't corrupt. You have those are the old timers that are making it that aren't corrupt. But the new are just born into a corruption, just like we're born into sin through the likeness of Adam. They're born into even more violence, possibly, just a thought. So he brings forth 3 sons. It says, and the earth was corrupt before Elohim, and the earth was filled with violence. And Elohim looked upon the earth and saw that it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Okay, remember after the fall, the ground was cursed, right? There was a curse on the ground. Man had to work it. It just wasn't going to freely give stuff up. Then we have Cain who was cursed, and now the ground's like, I'm just not even working for you, dude. You're just going to have to figure out something else. Well, now the whole earth, it's not just man, but man's actions have corrupted the earth. You know, the idea of environmentalism today, in my opinion, has gone too far. But it does have a scriptural basis. We're told that we are responsible for taking good care of the earth. Absolutely. Not because it's Mother Earth, but because it's God's creation that he created to house us in. Keep your house clean, basically, right? Vacuum, make your bed. Be a good steward of what the Lord's given you, so it will perpetually provide a good place for you to live. That's what they didn't do. They're no longer accepting or seeing what Elohim was doing, or what God created, what Yahweh Elohim had created for them. And in verse 12 it says, Elohim, this is the judge, the creator. He looked down upon the earth because he created the earth to be a certain way for man. He, as the creator, looks down at the earth and he saw that it was corrupt. Man had corrupted it. Their sin had created. Remember when Adam fell? Again, like I said, it was cursed. We know in Romans 8, that's why the earth itself is moaning for the children of God, sons of Elohim, to appear. Because the corrupt seed, the corrupt ones brought upon it terrible things. But the men of God, the sons of God, are going to change that, to bring it back, to undo what was done, right? To take us back into the new creation. All right, so everything is corrupted by their way. Again, this isn't from the Nephilim way. This isn't from the fallen angels way. They're not the ones accountable. Man's accountable. And here the Lord discusses with man, you are accountable and your actions have created this problem. All right, So it says, and Elohim said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me from the earth, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And see, I am going to destroy them from earth. I would suggest that, like we saw in Genesis 1 and then Genesis 2, how Genesis 2 fleshes out what happened in Genesis 1, I would suggest that the remainder of chapter 6 is the fleshing out of what happened in chapter 6, verse 3. When the Lord said, I'm not going to hang out that long, just 120 years, he got the idea. He's like, oh, and here's what you're going to do. All right, you're going to build these things. You're going to build. And he tells them how he's going to provide redemption. He gives hope in a time that seems hopeless. Well, that's what his word does for us. That's what Revelation. Those who cling to him may seem like they're in a hopeless situation, but because we have the word, we're not hopeless. We have an ark, right? We have a safe place. We're in the shadow of his wing is our safe place. So it says, and Elohim said to Noah, oh, I just read that. Okay, so he's going to destroy them from the earth, right? He's going to completely. Well, look, in verse 12, man destroyed the earth. And now in verse 13, God's going to destroy man. It's kind of measure for measure. You guys destroyed my creation. Now I'm going to destroy you. But again, mercy for destroying that polluted seed of all creation. He's preserving the unpolluted seed to start over. Give us another chance. All right. It says, make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with a covering. And this is how you are to make it. And the length of the ark is to be 300 cubits. Its width 50 cubits and its height 30 cubits. Make a window in the ark and complete it in the cubits from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with lower, second, and third decks. So it's basically 3 level. I want to go to Kentucky so bad and see the replica of the ark. I would love to do that. Haven't gotten there yet, and hopefully I will, but that's one of the things I want to see with my eyes. I want to walk in it, kind of get a feel. It said that it's about, in our measurements, if you're in America, about 1.5 football fields long. It's about 75 feet wide. I don't know if that's right. Anyway, it's really wide. But it's about 1.5 football fields wide. And it's 3 stories. So you're probably looking at what we would consider, about 4.5 stories, almost 5 stories high. This isn't a boat. This is basically a barge. It's just meant to float. It is not meant to be steered through the water. It's not meant to cut through the water. It's just meant to float on water. The Lord is going to take it where he wants to take it, or he's going to leave it there, whatever. But the Lord's the one that's moving this craft, this ark. You notice this ark is going to be pitched inside and outside. Yes, that's to waterproof it. But we also have the Ark of the Covenant we're going to talk about, which is made of wood, and it is inside and out covered with gold, the deity. That's where he's held. These arks are similar in a way that they're both covered on the inside and out. They're both to be preserved, right? And they're both holding life. One's holding the Torah, the written word of God, and the other's holding the man who is to carry out the Torah. The seed that's going to make this Torah become a living Torah, put the word inside Jesus, right? So this ark is covered with pitch. It is said that preserves it. So somewhere up in those mountains, somewhere in the Middle East, there's an ark somewhere. And it's said it's going to be found to be a testimony to the truth of the story. I believe it, whether you find it or not. But there are going to be some that maybe this will help them. Now let's talk really quick about this make a window. The word here for window is in the Hebrew can actually mean noon or midday, a form of light. Think of this. He put a window in the ark. Okay. But is it also possible that while, yes, light comes through a window, is it also possible that that's hinting to the fact that the Lord's going to be with them? The light. There's going to be a light put. I mean, a presence of God is going to go with them. He's not just putting them out and sending them. We know this because chapter 7, verse 1, a friend of mine, JD, brought this up years ago, and every time I read it, I think of him. It says in chapter 7, verse 1, and Yahweh said to Noah, come into the ark. That come says, hey, I'm already in here. Come on. You already built me a house. Hey, Noah, you did what I asked. You built this, and now I'm going to be the light inside. Because in the Ark of the Covenant that's covered in gold, the Lord is in the Holy of Holies place where the Ark of the Covenant is. Here's the first hint of that. This ark is going to be a part included in the redemption. Well, the Ark of the Covenant is also included in the redemption. And go read Revelation. That Ark of the Covenant keeps showing up. All right? It's a part of the very end. So anyway, sorry, I get a little excited about that. So then he says, and see, I myself am bringing flood waters on the earth, to destroy all flesh in which is the breath of life from under the heavens. All that is on the earth is to die. Where did the breath of life originally come from? The Lord. It's his to take, right? He breathed into Adam and he provided life. And then he set up the mechanisms of our bodies with lungs and a heart that would pump, so that when we come out of the womb and that breath, that air flows into it. We suck in that air just like Adam had it blown into him. Just like the Lord blew forcefully air into his creation, he made us so that when we're born and it's like a forceful air being put into us to jumpstart our lungs, jumpstart everything else working. How awesome is that? All right. He's doing this. He's saying, okay, this life that I gave, I'm going to snuff it out. It's been abused. Now, I do want to say this. You have a lot of people who died before the flood who were righteous people. Absolutely. So it's not that the only righteous people that existed went on the ark. We don't know if he was the only that had the pure DNA that went on, or if there were just others that they weren't supposed to go on. They were just going to die for whatever reason. That's possible. So it doesn't mean that everyone who died before the flood was wicked. I would suggest, since Methuselah dies the week, we're going to say the week before, but we know for sure the year of the flood, since he dies right before the flood, my suggestion would be that the righteous all died before the flood, and all that were left to die in the flood were the unrighteous. The mercy of God took out everyone before the fearful moment of the flood happening, before that judgment happens. Okay, so do we see that in the end if we see that in the beginning? Yes, we do. In Revelation 21, when the new heaven and new earth happen, right, all those who are wicked are already separated into hell, I guess you could say. They've already been separated. And the righteous have already been separated. The righteous are held. Stay here just for a little while he makes the new heaven and earth, right, with fire. So those who are held in the Lord are preserved through that fire. And those who aren't are consumed by the fire. That's what happens at the end of Revelation chapter 20. Here you have water. The two great judgments, water and fire. And 2 Peter 3 talks about that. The first great judgment was the flood. The second great judgment is in fire. So water and fire. Okay. So here you have these two things working side by side. You have man being preserved in the ark through the flood. And in the end, you have man being preserved through the fire by the Lord. Because his all-consuming fire doesn't consume his own type. All right. So I don't know if I just kind of went off point there or not. All right. We're going to stop there. We're going to come back and talk about the last of chapter 6 next time I see you. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you soon. And I hope you're getting something to chew on today. All right. Bye-bye.